And we're rolling. Welcome back, everyone, to video 4 that I'm up to. Still going through this book by Michael Hampton. I don't know if you can see it there, Figure Drawing and Design. We're still on the first chapter, which has got to do with the gesture, but we've covered a lot of things. Last we left off was connections and how to, if you remember, you've got the structure of a rib cage and then the pelvis. And remember, you can use boxy shapes if you feel better representing these areas with boxy shapes. And then we looked at the way this 10th rib, remember one of the landmarks at the front, the 10th rib, connects to the crest of the pelvis, and same at the back. And if we do the one over here shaped like an oval, little eggs, 10th rib, landmarks, just you were practicing, you were supposed to be practicing connecting these shapes. That's what we left off on. Now we're going to go into a little bit of anatomy in regards to the arms and the legs. So what you see I've got up here on the screen now is a Renaissance figure sketch. And what I'm going to do is, first off, before that, we'll look at the bones of the arm. So you'll have your scapular bone, which is on the back, on your shoulder blades. You've got the head of the humerus, and the clavicle meets the back of the scapula there. You've got the head of the humerus there. It turns into a kind of mallet shape, like I said last week. Now, if we've got the arm, if you've got your arm on the side and you've got your palm facing to the front, that's called supination. It's like when you're holding a bowl of soup, your hand is, the palm is faced up to support the soup. So it's called supination. It's not called supination because of the soup. It's just, that's a one way of remembering it, a bit easier. Okay, so if you've got your hand, the palm, fingers, and the thumb, on the outside you've got a small, one of the forearm bones, which start on the outside of this humerus. Remember this bone here. Underneath that, you're going to have a bone kind of shaped like this. So it connects to on the outside here, and it gets a bit thicker to make like a rectangle shape, which is your wrist. Okay, next to that, there's like a hook, which is it hooks onto the humerus here. So if I was to look at it from behind, this end of the mallet shape on the humerus, we're looking at this bit. If I'm looking at from behind, there's like a hook shape, and that hook and bone, that's your elbow, and it extends down to a small ball near the wrist called the, can't remember, but it's the bulgy bit outside your wrist there. And that's called the ulna. Okay, so I'll draw it in here. The pinky side, this is my pinky here, and it connects like that. From the if you turn your hand over, I'm trying to make this look like it's going around. If you turn your hand over, you go from this. So this radius, it's called a radius, I'm guessing, because you can turn it over about 180 degrees, I'm guessing. So your palm, this is the back of your, this was the inside of your hand. Now this is the back of your hand. And when that happens, oops. Oh yeah, inside. Pinky side. So the hook, oops. The hook goes under the radius. I'll draw it in a different color. That elbow, the ulnar. So the elbow, the ulnar, and that little bump on the end of your wrist, that's going under the radius. This radius has flipped over, so your hand is facing down. This one is facing up. Okay. And we'll do one look from behind. So if I'm looking from the back, that's the shoulder blade. Head of the humerus. Can only see a bit of the clavicle there. This is your head, your neck. Okay. Humerus, we're looking from the back now. Geez, that's a huge scapula. Okay. If my hand is supinated, so it's turned like it's holding a bowl of soup. I've got on the outside of that humerus, remember, is the radius. And that goes into the hand. And this back of the elbow now, so we see that little hook, and it goes to the bump on the pinky side. This is the pinky. And I'll just differentiate that with this color red. That, and then I'll probably use green for the radius. So spend some time just identifying the bones on figures that you're looking at. You don't have to worry about drawing the whole figure. Just focus on a limb and go through these acts of maybe identifying the scapula, the head of the humerus. If you could have x-ray vision, where would you picture it to be on the figure that you're looking at? Where's the elbow? Where's the little bump on the end of the wrist? The radius, always remember it's on the outside, and then it flips over. Yep, it's on the outside and it's got a thicker end at the wrist. So if you represented the ulnar, which has the elbow, I'll do it in red, sorry. Goes to that bump. And then in green, I'll do the radius. And it goes to make that boxy shape at the end of your wrist. And if you simplified these shapes down, they would kind of appear like that. And from a 2D perspective, that would be how you'd perceive it at its simplest form. Okay. Now we'll have a look at the screen, and I've got this guy here, and we're going to analyze this front arm. Okay. So I'll just get his whole torso. Okay. Wrapping lines. We'll just get into the habit always of doing that. That's the whole of the neck for the rib, from the rib cage. Now, let's look at this arm. Okay. Now, what can I identify here? So, I'll get my mouse. I'm going to look for the head of the humerus. And what can I see here? All I can get is this very sharp elbow point. Remember that wrapped around the head of the end of the humerus? So you've got that elbow point, and then I can also identify this little bump on the wrist near the pinky, on the pinky side. Now, working with what landmarks, well, so-called landmarks that I can see on the arm, I'm going to drop these points there. So I'll just do another arm on the, right here on this below. And I'm really exaggerating this, okay? Okay, we've got the head of the humerus. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. And the elbow is like a hook shape, remember? And it's going towards the pinky side. If this hook shape is kind of like this is how I'm seeing it, hook onto the bottom of the humerus. So it would be the humerus mallet shape would have to fit in like this. So if I draw that mallet shape here, I can connect my humerus to that mallet shape. Now I've identified two bones here. The third, the radius, where is that? So remember, it's on the outside of the arm, on the elbow, on where your elbow joint is, on the outside. So if you get confused, just sort of look at your own arm and then feel your elbow joint, and then outside away from your body, that's where the radius will be sitting, and you can turn that radius over. Okay, so where can I see the end of the radius here? I sort of can make out a boxy shape, thanks to all the practice we've been doing in the past few weeks. So if there was a boxy shape, I'm back on this screen now, and going to the outside of the mallet head of the humerus. I'll separate this so it's easier to see. It's the radius. And then in front is that ball at the end of the wrist going to the elbow. So what we've got is this. Do you get that? That's all we've got down here. Now, let's go through that exercise again. And we'll do it for this image here. Hope you can see that easy enough. Okay. We've got the back. I'm going to gesture in a big torso area. Remember just getting into the habit of it. Got carried away doing the legs there, sacrum, whole of the rib cage. Okay, now hold for the arm to come out is what I mean. So the long axis, and if we can look down here at his arm, at his wrists, if I was to make a boxy shape out of that wrist, it would be looking kind of like that. And I'll use his hand for reference, which is showing the back of his hand resting on maybe a rock with a cloth underneath it. Okay, so on this side, long axis, I'm just going to throw that wrist boxy shape there. Okay, now, what can you identify here? This is the scapula. This, I think, is the top of the clavicle from the other side. Oh, sorry, it's the acromion process, I think it's called. But you'll see a bump. I think this is where the ball of the head of the humerus sits here. I don't think it's right up there. It sits underneath the scapula and acromion process, and it would be around here. What else do I identify as the elbow? And I can see the ball at the end of the elbow for the ulna. So with those bits identified, I will draw it in here. So I've got humerus bone going to where we don't know what the end will look like yet. And with practice, you'll understand it straight away. But we'll go into it here in depth. This is the elbow shape I see. You see this from white to dark. It's a very sharp shape. So I've represented it here. It was like a square edge. And then it's continuing down to the ball at the end of the ulna. On the pinky side, remember? We've got the pinky here. Now, if that's our elbow hook, it should be hanging onto the mallet of the humerus if it was sitting there like that. So I'll draw in the head of the humerus like so. Now, the outside of the elbow is here. Under the humerus is where and look at the other screen now, this point here, under the end of the humerus, it is going over and connecting to the end of the wrist. So I'll draw this here with a couple different colors. Essentially, this is what we're seeing. The elbow. This was the end of the humerus. Okay. Now the outside, the radius, sitting over here, and it's making the end that squarish shape of the wrist. Now remember the palm, back of the palm, thinking here, and that's how we would analyze the bone structure underneath this figure. We'll do one more. Just let me double check if this is recording. For some reason, I'm a bit paranoid. It's not recording. I have to do it all over again, but we're okay. I know I use these models quite a lot, everyone, but not sure how to get royalty-free images yet, so bear with me. And remember, I keep on saying to everyone to give me feedback. What can I improve on? I gotta explain again that I'm by no means a full-on expert. I just like to study figure drawing, many things to do with art, and this is just a video to sort of help you, maybe a supplement to if you go out, and I encourage you to buy the real book. Sometimes there might be concepts that are hard to understand, and maybe I go through them on here. It makes it easier to understand. So, okay. That was that little spiel. We've got, okay, so I'll gesture in that torso. I think it would be, I don't get to see the whole thing. It's good for you guys also to just invent figures. Okay. And the arm, long axis, the active side. This is lingo you'd understand from the other videos. So if you haven't watched them, please. Head, remember that cervical vertebrae of the neck. Okay, so I'm going to identify the scapula first here. The scapula, you get some hints with the shadow down here. That's the bottom of that Dorito shape of a scapula, I think. This is the top edge of the scapula, and you get help because it's this long, straightish spine of the scapula. The only way you get really good at identifying these landmarks is just to keep studying figures and images and just try to identify where the structures are underneath the skin and the muscle and fat. So I'll draw in that scapula, and it's because this arm is turning up, like moving upwards, the scapula, the spine of the scapula would rotate upwards as well. So usually the scapula would probably be sitting like this if the arm was down. But because the arm is going up, it tilts upwards. So that's that scapula there. We've got, I can see a bit of the elbow. I can see, you can make out a shape of the wrist, the squarey part. I can't see that little bump on the pinky side. Don't worry, we've got some landmarks we can work off. So at the end of the scapula is where you'd have the ball of the humerus sitting about here. So I'll whack that in. I can see an elbow joint. What else is there? Now, with that elbow joint, I think if I had to guess, the mallet shape would be something like that, sitting on here. So the hook of the elbow is going underneath. We can't see it because we're blocked out by the forearm, but if you could see through this, it would be there. And this is the outside of the mallet, and it is the radius which makes that squarish shape. Okay, so we'll do it over here again, in case that was a bit confusing. Okay, the head of the humerus, and from looking at this, it was going to go something like that. So that's the humerus connecting along that, well, that shaft of bone, the upper arm. The elbow, it would go through to there if I could see through that forearm. And remember the outer through there, and then on the other side of this mallet, it'd be the connection of the radius to that mallet, and it would be shaped like that. So hopefully this concept is okay to understand. Hopefully we'll go through it again, I'm sure, in other anatomy books, but practice looking through the figures, upper arm, the forearm, draw it simply, and then identify the edge of the elbow. Look for identifying areas, the head of the humerus, the end of the wrist, which creates the boxy shape. Okay, so now we'll press forward onto the legs, the bones, main bones of the legs. Try to find some examples here. Okay. Now, the legs, we'll have a look at identifying the pelvis, which I was showing you as like a semicircle. If I was to look at it 3/4, you'd have a leg. Bones coming out like that. Now, the parts that we look out for on the legs, well, the bottom area, is these landmarks we went through last week. If that's the pelvis, we're looking for the crest. And the crest on here is, remember, you'll see like the belt line, where you've got the belt line and then it just disappears into the abdomen, and then you can see a hard line, which is the crest of the pelvis. So that's what I've got here in the red. We're going to, it's kind of similar to the humerus, where you've got a big knob of the head of the femur, and then it goes to that mallet shape, much like the humerus, remember? On the outside is the Okay, sorry for that interruption, but we've got the fibula going from the outside, and that makes that large bump on the outside of your ankle. So let's pretend this triangle shape is the foot area. We've got a large bone, which is the tibia, and that goes to the inside of your ankle. You feel a big knob on the inside of the ankle there. Over the top is the patella. Okay, so you can see some similarities with the arm. So you got this, the femur of the upper arm, of the upper leg, has that big head of the bone, and then it turns into that mallet. At the bottom, the similarities is you've got these two bones, and this fibula is always on the outside, and it's the thinner bone. The tibia is on the inside, and it makes that flat shape of your shin. Okay, so let's identify it on this figure. Okay, so I'll draw that pelvis shape that I use. Long axis, some rhythms. And then on this side, long axis. And the foot is on a rock of some sort. Okay, so where will we find the top of those crests of the pelvis? You see them there. And on my figure, I'll roughly have it. I'll erase this end bit. The crest would be there and there. It comes around. Now, above this is the crest, the belt line. Just below, you'll see a notch. There's a bit of a shadow there. It's hard to see. I can tell you the head of the femur should be around there. And what can we identify down here? The patella is this little knob on the end of the knee. This fat bit up here is the head of the femur. Well, the mallet part. So it would be like a really chunky shape like this. Okay. On the outside of this femur, this mallet head, you've got a small knob you can identify here, and that will go down. It will connect to that big knob on the outside of the ankle. So I'll draw that in. Let's connect it like that. The tibia will sit underneath that mallet shape of the femur, kind of like this. So I'm trying to represent that here. We're going to the inside of the ankle. There's that sharp blade of the calf of the tibia you can feel on yourself. Now we'll try it on this side. So if I'm to look through, I would say the head of the femur is there. The patella I can identify moving down. This is the inside head of that femur, the knob on the end. So it'd be going like that. just underneath that patella there. So I'll connect these bits. Okay, so on the outside there, connects to the outside knob of the ankle, and I'm sitting underneath this mallet would be the tibia. Oh, sorry, the fibula. Hang on. What am I doing? Oh, well, that's way off. Let me start again. This outside here connects outside that big knob on the outside of your ankle. Yep, and then the tibia will connect to the inside ankle. And it's got like that blade shape. You can feel on your own half. Well, shin bone, sorry. Let's go through another example. I don't want to rush these guys. I know it can be boring to some people, but I got to encourage you to try and stick through and listen to everything I'm passing on to you, because I've been through this so many times. I'm trying to just give you the essentials, not all the fluff or the wasted time of things that you don't really need to know. This lesson's taking a long time, but every bit is crucial. Okay? Let's see. We've got the guy leaning back, pelvis area. Gesture in the legs. What is he sitting on? The lowest stone? It's on an angle. It's funny. Okay. Anyway, identify the top of the pelvis there. You see that belt line there, and I will say it's around about here on my figure. I should be sitting on that oval shape. Center line. Okay. We'll do the leg, this leg here. Below that crest, there's a tiny bulge here, I think is the head of the femur. I'll put in a small box shape for the pelvis. Oh, sorry, the patella. Now, if the patella is sitting like that, it would be sitting on top of the mallet head of the femur, like so. Outside of that mallet, we've got the fibula all the way down to the big bone outside your ankle. This sitting like this, the tibia, and it'll go to the inside ankle. Okay, now the other side. I'll put some wrapping lines. Should have got into the habit of that. The patella looks like it's facing down that way. The femur, I'm saying it's underneath this crest around here. And it would hug that patella like so. So what I mean by hugging is this patella would be kind of on a path like this on that mallet here. Outside of that head of the femur would be the bone to the outside of the ankle, and then this is the tibia, your big shin bone going to the inside of the ankle. Next, That's enough for legs, actually. We've done quite a few examples on that, but always, again, guys, look for figures and spend time identifying these bones. The next little blurb he mentions is the importance of spheres, these round cylinder shapes, and wrapping them, and knowing different angles to represent it at. Now, this figure that we've got on the screen, I'll quickly gesture in the torso, and what he's mentioning is to get into a good habit. I'm assuming of, okay, I'll quickly do this and I'll explain what I'm mean to. Now we've got our figure here quickly gestured in. How are you going to represent this cylinder here? This upper arm as a cylinder. So if you've got your rib cage, the whole of the rib cage, that'll be the base of that cylinder, and then we'll go to the end like so. Before it changes orientation into the forearm, and you draw your wrapping lines like that. The upper right arm of this fellow, his upper right arm, is kind of going out with the whole of his in the rib there to fit that arm, and then I'm guessing that the forearm is going like that as a tube. And then you continue on down. So we try that with the upper leg, the lower leg, and then there's wrapping lines. So just get into the habit of adding that to your repertoire of exercises or even warm-ups. That'll get you into, it'll train your eye to see which way the cylinder of the limbs are going, or even the torso. The big sort of cylinder shape in itself. Now, practice a lot of that next week, or after this, sorry. Practice a lot of those skills, identifying bones underneath the skin for the upper limbs and the lower limbs. He's also going into, we're going to go into a quick little talk on these things called T overlaps. So if you have a bunch of balls like so, and you erased bits of it, you would be, to give you a sense of depth, we push overlaps. And where would these overlaps be on this little image? I'll show you in the green. So you've got a T overlap there. They're called T overlaps. There's one there. You've got one here, here. Wherever you meet another line, one continues through and one stops. And this gives you a sense of depth. So you can see that this one is definitely in front of that ball there. This ball here is definitely in front of this ball here. And we use this trick on the figure also. So I'll show you a couple examples of overlaps. And what do I mean on the figure? you've got, I'll gesture in this quick, but this forearm here, you can see it over a T line here. And this simple line helps your eye identify this forearm as coming in front of the upper arm. And the line, head, arm, down. Okay. Now to crudely represent this on this little gesture here, I'll do it in red. So you've got this forearm going over the line of that bicep. That's your T, and that's your T overlap. You could even see this back of the head going onto that shoulder, the back shoulder. That's a T overlap. And that pushes the head in front of the back. Here we've got the T overlap. So if you've got the back of the arm there, and you've got a hint of the lat, you've got a T overlap showing that this arm was in front of the torso. And then you've got tiny hinting T overlaps where I'm pointing here on the forearm. We're not going into the forearm muscles yet, but you can see how this little trick makes you see that there's the T overlap there. Makes you see this forearm as slightly in front of this upper arm. Okay. We've got another example here now. Okay, the leg, we see a few examples. This T overlap here. So it's a big T. So pelvis, we've got that upper leg shaped like this. T overlap. Ankle would be here. And I'm pointing it out on here. And even this little section, you could push that to show that this, the base of that foot is sitting slightly ahead of that shin bone. If you really have a look here, this bit, I'm just black. It's a bit of a T overlap, as well as this. So if you see them on your figure that you're drawing, try and push it a bit. If it doesn't show that overlap sort of strongly, just maybe use a darker, go a bit heavier on the pen or pencil. So for example, here I might do it a bit heavier just to lead the eye to see that section, and it'll convey some information to the viewer, like what part is behind and what part is in front. Okay, now the next section, he goes quickly into, well, he's got a few pages on it, but it's forms and connections. And with that, he wants to emphasize I think I went through it before, but the importance of being able to represent shapes using cylinders and boxes, and even spheres. It's a shocker, but you get the point. With these shapes, you can construct anything, not only the parts of the human body, but pretty much anything you can see in life, like cups, uh, TVs. You can represent everything with these shapes pretty much. And it's a good habit to, if you're just doodling around, listening to something boring at work or at school, just sit around and combine shapes, practice combining them and wrapping them. This is an excellent exercise to do. It helps you see the figure more as a form than 2D flat drawing. Okay, just practice combining these organic shapes, or these basic shapes rather. Draw through, circle, square, I need a bit of practice on this, but you get the point, I think. And then wrap these forms to even push it further. Okay. Now, this whole chapter on gesture, the most important bits, they're all important, I've said before, but the 4 top things to take away from the first chapter in this book is what I just mentioned before: constructing and identifying, changing organic shapes into simple basic shapes, like the sphere, cube, and cylinder. The next important mention, he says, is giving the form or wrapping line to emphasize these basic shapes. And if I'm representing, say, the top of the leg, add the wrapping lines when you can, or just hint at them. Combining volumes, which we mentioned just before. So if I was to, it's a huge spherical shape around that cylinder, and if I'm doing it on the figure, I've got the, say, a leg coming out. I'm drawing, remember I'm wrapping, using form lines, wrapping lines to help you view the form, the rhythm of the form. Okay. And also adding connections to the volumes. So that was what we went to as the refresher from the last episode, was the beginning of this episode, was connecting volumes like so. So I connected this rib area to this pelvic area. Okay, so that does it for this session. Oh yeah, before I go, I've got two examples. What is right up here? So this is everything we've been learning. I'm just going to ghost in a quick gesture, and that's a sphere. This pelvis we've got here, it's another shape. I'll represent it with that cylinder. If you want, drop in landmarks if you can identify them. So I've got the scapula there, cylinder of the neck. I'll represent the head as a sphere as well. Leg. Now you can see this leg is really foreshortened, and I'm going to push it with those form lines. The form of this calf is opposite to the one of the upper leg. The upper leg is kind of like this, going away. And the lower leg is shaped more like this. Okay. One more before we go. I just wanted to show you these quickly. What you do as an exercise gesture. Rhythms. With that foot going out. Very quick. Okay, so I'll look for some landmarks like that of the back, the scapula, spine, sacrum, to the top of the crest. Here's that T shape. See the back going down into the waist? You can really push that. It's hard to have all these concepts in your head in the beginning, but focus on one part for a while and then focus on other exercises. So what I mean is, one day focus on just doing the shapes. One day focus on just gesture. One day focus on form lines. You don't even have to draw the contours or anything. Just see if you can represent limbs just doing cylinders like this, continuous ones. Okay, I'll continue on here. Upper arm, there's another T-shaped strong one here. The bicep going over the forearm. So I can emphasize that there. Now, I'll add the forms of the limbs and add the wrapping lines, the calf at the back. And this is really quick. Okay. Now that's that example, and I think I'll let you go and have a practice with that. We've covered pretty much the whole gesture chapter in his book, and if you've made it this far, really well done on you for keep staying awake. I know it can sometimes be boring, but a lot of things, if you want to get good, you have to put up with the boring stuff first, and then later you can really fly. So next week, I'm not sure, I might get into Steve Houston's book on gesture, or I can continue on this Michael Hampton's book where he gets onto head drawing, but we'll see how we go. In the meantime, keep practicing, and hope you enjoy all this stuff. Subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.